What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated on Fan Nation. And today, in our episode of the Ducks Dish podcast, we're talking about Dan Lanning's introductory press conference. Got to meet the man himself on Monday in Eugene. And joining me on this episode of the pod, we got Stephen Blanchette to talk some Ducks. How we doing, man? Thanks for being here.
What's going on, Max? Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm great. Excited to talk some Ducks. It's been a cold day in Eugene. It feels like we're in the Arctic with the way that the weather's been changing. Hopped on a pod just before this, actually, so it's been a very rapid-fire day. If you guys are watching in the live show, thank you so much for tuning in. Go ahead and throw us some questions so that we can guide the show in the live chat box, or if you're watching on replay, thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and drop a comment and let me know what your first impressions are of Oregon's new head coach, Dan Lanning, after seeing that presser yesterday. So I think I'll start it there, Stephen. Really open-ended question. You know, what did you make of yesterday's press conference and your initial impressions on Dan Lanning?
Very positive initial impressions on Coach Lanning. I think that I left the press conference with both a feeling of high hopes and high expectations, which is exactly what I was hoping to have happen with that presser, right? I think we got a sense of the kind of fiery guy that we're getting in terms of him being young, his passion for the game. And I think really sky's the limit for this guy. I was really pleasantly surprised, honestly. What about you?
Yeah, I echo a lot of those similar sentiments. I was really excited about all the energy that he had. I think in the moment I was really just focused on the actual press conference itself. But I've since listened back to it and I'm like, dang, I kind of just want to throw some pads on and get out there. Even though I was never the best tackle football player in my high school days, but man, yeah, you can tell how he's gonna be able to motivate these guys, no question about it. He's going to get the players excited. He seems really relatable. And I think one of the biggest things that really stood out to me was how I think he just addressed a lot of people's questions really well, or anything that might have been skeptical about. I think one of the biggest questions that people had is this is his first head coaching gig, right? One of my good buddies, Eric Scopel, he writes for 247 covering the Ducks. He had a really awesome question just about what makes you ready for this. You're only 35. It's your first job. Why do you think you're going to be able to take this program where the players, the boosters, the fans ultimately want it to go, which is a national championship game? And he was saying, I don't have a ton of experience as far as it goes, with timing and everything, but I have really quality experience. You look at his time at Georgia and Alabama, learning under Mike Norvell at Memphis, and I think that inspired a lot of confidence for me and a lot of the other people that were in attendance yesterday.
I agree. I mean, he's from the Saban coaching tree, right? So we know that everybody who's from that tree, they all coach the same sort of way and they all recruit the same sort of way. They know how to get it done at the highest level of college football. Obviously, learning under Kirby Smart was huge for him. I mean, Mel Tucker was on that staff over at Alabama as well. So this guy's been with proven winners throughout his entire career. I think what gets lost for a lot of people is let's appreciate how far he's come at such a young age, right? I mean, I think that shows that this guy's a real rock star. I don't think he would have been getting these positions that he's gotten unless he really had the football acumen that's ahead of his time. It sort of reminds me of sort of a defensive Sean McVay sort of situation in terms of a real young head coach coming in there and getting the opportunity to put his stamp on a program that's pretty well established, right? I think it's a direction. It's a clear indicator of where the program, I think, is going, or where, Rob Mullins wants the program to go, right? I mean, first time it's been a hire that's outside of the program in the last 4 or 5 coaches since Rich Brooks, I believe. So I think that we should appreciate how far he's come in such a short amount of time and be excited about that. I agree with your earlier sentiment. After that presser, I just wanted to go hit some sleds, right? Throw on this helmet that I've got behind me and, take some snaps. He's a guy that you want to run through a brick wall for. And I think it really showed, especially when he was talking about the football specific questions that were thrown at him. You could see a sort of glint in his eye that came up, right? I mean, when he was going through the initial kind of thank yous to the program, I'm happy to be here, the boilerplate kind of stuff. he was just a little less engaged. But then when the football questions came out, you could tell. It's like he said, my heart beats a little faster when I talk about football. You could tell that that's the kind of guy we're getting. And I think that's really going to resonate with this team. It's going to resonate with recruits. I think that a really early indicator of that is the whole Seven McGee situation and how that flipped on its head in about 90 minutes. So that was very encouraging to me. I think also the retention that I heard today, retaining Don Johnson for multiple years is going to be huge, right? Because he's not just some young gun who's coming in here and is just completely cleaning house and trying to sweep under the rug everything that's been done. He's trying to truly build off of that. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, there's a lot of good points that you just mentioned. I liked what you said about, maybe we do need to turn it on its head and from the skepticism that some people have, like, what does it say about him as a coach to be able to get to this point at such a young age? Clearly, he's doing things the right way, and he's been around a lot of brilliant minds. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban are the biggest ones that people want to talk about. But I also think that, you talk about the retention, the reported retention of Don Johnson. I think that's really big because the players obviously really like him. I remember last night I was, editing that Seven McGee story. And then I was actually in the kitchen making dinner, and my buddy Jacob comes up to me and he's just holding his phone, and it's Seven's tweet saying that I'm staying. And then just from, the inner editor part of me, I was like, what is going on here? Like, why is it this has never happened before? I feel like at least for it to happen that quickly. So, hopped in there and made my changes to update it. But I also really like the situation that he's coming into, right? You look at how Mario built out this program and the positions that he recruited at a really high level. You look at guys in the trenches, especially on the offensive side of the ball and the offensive line. There's a lot of proven depth there, which is great. Everybody except for let's see, we got George Moore is going to be moving on, and then Amavai Ulu, big offensive lineman, he's going to be moving on. But there's guys that are ready to take that bigger step because they've been doing all the cross training, they've been distributing those reps. I mean, I feel like that's probably the position that I'm most confident about moving forward, that and the running backs. But I bring that up, Stephen, to say, like, Mario has built this in a very good way as from a roster standpoint, right? And that Lanning's going to come in and take a pretty similar approach, right? We're all seeing the blueprint that is being implemented here. Mario learned under Saban, and then he did that to the Oregon roster. So you're probably going to see some pretty big similarities there as far as Lanning's approach here on the recruiting trail. But yeah, I think that's another part that is worth talking about, right? With when you're talking about, people want to know what kind of a recruiter he is. We hear about the relentlessness, and I think he's obviously going to be super relatable because he's so young. And I think that when I look at the topic of recruiting and what is ahead of him and what Oregon needs to do, it starts with those guys on the roster. And Seven McGee is a phenomenal playmaker. We've seen it a lot already. I guess we've seen the flashes of it. To have him back when we still don't know what's happening with Travis Dye and CJ Verdell, I think that's really big for the Ducks heading into next year.
I think it's huge. Yeah. And I mean, let's be real. Seven McGee didn't have too many touches overall this year. Right. And so that's probably, I'm going to assume, a pretty big reason why he initially made that call to go and transfer. And I think Dan Lanning probably had a conversation with him, something along the lines of, I know what you've got. I see the talent in you and we're going to utilize it. Right. So that speaks volume. I mean, this guy just got here. He just got here. I doubt he knows Seven McGee too well. Right. So being able to have that conversation with him, and not only just get him to say, okay, maybe I'll think about it, coach, but get him to flip back and I guess recommit. Right. I haven't seen something like this in such a quick time period ever, really. It's definitely happened, but right. I mean, it's just, it was surprising how quick it turned. And with recruiting, I mean, he's voracious, right? And he's going to get in there in these living rooms with these young kids, and he's going to be more relatable with these guys. And I love the confidence too, right? Going yesterday in the presser saying, we can get any player in the country. We are going to go try to get every great player in this country, like not shying down, not mentioning, having to deal with the Lane Kiffin factor at SC and, not having time.
Lincoln Riley.
Lincoln Riley. And then not being able to, or not just being out west and not being able to have these kids from the Southeast, from Texas, that kind of thing, being able to easily come out into Eugene. I don't think that bugs him at all. I think he accepts that as a challenge and looks forward to it. So I was really enthused about what he was saying with that. And just regardless of all the reports of how voracious a recruiter he is. I think it's funny too. I saw a picture of him in a recruit's living room. It was recent with him, Kirby Smart, obviously the recruit, and you could just tell by the picture the difference in those two guys. And Coach Smart's a great coach. This is not a knock on Kirby Smart, but Kirby Smart's there in his loafers, his collared shirt, his Georgia sweater, and Coach Lanning's in there with his Jordans or Nikes, something swaggy on his feet.
Dripped out.
Dripped out. Just super nice hoodie, right? Like very relaxed. He's the one with his arm around the recruit, right? So, I mean, you can tell he's already the guy, at least at Georgia, it seemed like. I bet he was leading a lot of those conversations in those living rooms because he's probably a lot more relatable. So I'm really excited. He reminded me in a lot of ways of a young Mario, like in terms of the, brick by brick mentality. And again, appreciating what's here. I love that he made several points to acknowledge what was already built here and being able to capitalize that. And I mean, we know how loaded this team is. They were 75% of underclassmen last season. This team is loaded. They're set up for success. So we needed a guy who believes in that. It isn't going to come in and try to completely overhaul everything. He's going to try to work with what the best things that we have, on the roster now, and then improve with his process based on that. So I was really enthused about every aspect of that recruiting kind of conversation, both when he was asked about it and when he kind of brought it up in his introductory statement.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about, the blueprint that Mario and him are obviously going to be working from, and how good of a situation it is for him to walk into from a personnel standpoint. And that's another part of kind of what you were saying about him saying, we want to develop these guys and we want to run schemes that are appealing for players to play in, that's going to draw people in. And, when they're here, we want to maximize on their strengths and, run our kind of schemes like that. So bunch of great stuff there, Steven. We're starting to get some comments and questions here, so want to make sure I address some of these. Nick says, I believe Lanning is the right choice to keep the Oregon Ducks rolling. Loved his press conference. Can't wait to see who he gets from the transfer portal. Let's go Ducks. Yeah, the transfer portal is going to be big. I think just with regard to early signing period coming, less than 24 hours here. We're recording this on Tuesday evening. I think it's kind of going to be important for Oregon to, and maybe Oregon fans, I guess in particular, to kind of reset the expectations a little bit. That's not like I'm not saying that's a slight for Lanning at all, but just look at the timing, right? You have such a tremendous amount of talent coming off the board tomorrow and over these next couple of days that, it's already kind of a limited situation as far as that goes, just because of the calendar. But the transfer portal is going to be huge. We can talk more about that later here in the show. Christopher says, I'm liking the hire, super excited for the potential ceiling. That's I think kind of more of what you and I were thinking about, Steven, with just how young he is and all of the great experience that he's already had. Let's see. So then our first question is also from Christopher. He asks, so what are the thoughts on keeping Salavea, BMAC, and other studs already on the staff? This is obviously, I'd say, the most pressing questions right now, because we're already seeing, reports and rumors of some staff members following Mario to Miami. I think the most prominent is probably Alex Mirabal. He's a Miami guy. He's Mario's right-hand man. That probably shouldn't surprise anybody. And then Ken Wilson's getting a head coaching job at Nevada. Let's see, we got DeRuiter going to Texas Tech to head that defense. Marcel Yates is following him to Texas Tech. I think those are the biggest ones that kind of come to mind. But I think BMAC's probably one of the most important guys to keep on this staff. When you look at the caliber of wide receivers that he's brought, I feel like this transition in the coaching staff is kind of an opportunity to reset and really hopefully get a good offense in place that can utilize a lot of these awesome weapons that they have. But to Joe Salavea's credit too, he's done a tremendous job with the defensive line. I think they've been pretty solid. You look at Brendan Dorless, Kayvon Thibodeau, who's obviously kind of bouncing back and forth between backers and linemen, but I think that those would be two great guys to keep on the staff. What are your thoughts on that, Steven?
I agree. I think both of them are people I'd like to see retained. Specifically BMAC, just because when you're thinking about that receiver room, I think one of the big complaints among the fan base, at least, was that we didn't air it out this year, right? And we have so much talent in the receiving core. Where's the big throws? Where are the numbers? And so that guy helped get him there. And I think, and I think that Lanning said he's going to air it out, right? So I'm really excited for these receivers to get their opportunity. to really show the talent that they've got. So I think retaining BMAC is going to be big with just keeping that receiver room where it needs to be, but also keeping recruiting, at a high level in that receiver position. And then Salve, yeah, I mean, what he's done with the defensive line is really incredible. I mean, he's definitely going to be a top 5 pick, right? Potentially number 1. So that kind of speaks for itself in his resume. Dorless has, I think, a really high ceiling in terms of potential. So I would like to see them both at the same time. I just based off the presser, I kind of trust Lanning to bring in some additional help where he might need it, right? I mean, we spoke about it earlier offline. If the University of Oregon, which is widely viewed at this moment as a stepping stone job for a head coach, becomes a coordinator factory for people to take coordinators after successful runs, I think that's fantastic. I would take that any day. So I also trust him to kind of bring some youth and new blood in, but at the same time, you've got to build with the best blocks that you've got in the house, right? And I think BMAC and Salave are both fall into that category. So I'd love to see them both retained.
Totally agree. And then Michael O'Brien, thanks for the question, Michael. Any details on his contract yet? Years, salary, opt-out clauses, Nike Jet. He's going to have 24/7 access to the Nike Jet. I mean, that's got to be, I think that's just, kind of assumed at this point with how relentless the recruiting efforts have been. But let's see if I can share my screen and get some of the contract stuff here. So hopefully that's showing up all right. But so the biggest question I think a lot of people have is the buyout. So we're seeing it here. This is a public record from the University of Oregon. In that first year, it's $14 million, and then it decreases gradually over the rest of his contract. And then we can also look at the terms here, the numbers, the money that everyone wants to look at throughout his contract. Let's see. Okay, yeah, here it is. So 6-year deal. The total, I added it all up, so it comes out to 6 years, $29.1 million. And then you have your various incentives here, obviously, as you can see there on your screen. This is all for, at least the first ones up here are all for, appearances. And I think that, you can see here, winning the college football playoff national championship, you can just get even more money. And then some of the benchmarks here as we kind of make our way down here. But I think another benefit that people maybe aren't isn't talked about enough is with him being such a young guy, I feel like there's not as much of an expectation for having a larger contract since he's a first-time head coach. So the good thing about that is that you can use some of that money that you might have paid Mario, say if he were to stay. I think the reported contract was 10 years, $85 million. This is quite a bit less than that. So, you can use not all of it, but, use a decent chunk of that money to hopefully go out and get some pretty fire coordinators.
Yep, I agree. What you can also do with that additional money is, let's say, fingers crossed, he has some real immediate huge success year 1, year 2, and maybe there is some news about potential other places calling, then you can use that to be able to maybe give him a new deal, up his compensation a little bit. Like we saw with Mario after he won that Pac-12 title. And I believe at that time he was the 11th highest paid coach in the Pac-12. So it was clear it was clear that we needed to change that immediately. So I think that that's also something that we could use in that fund, so to speak.
Absolutely. All right, let's see here. So hopefully, if you guys are watching on the YouTube live stream, you can go back and see, some of the fine print here in the contract for Oregon's new head coach, Dan Lanning. Thanks for the question, Michael. I know that was some big news today coming out of Eugene was about his contract. So people are talking about that. And then Alyssa's comment here, I really like this. Alyssa says, it's awesome to see some recruits postponing / keeping their decision instead of flipping and current players staying instead of transferring. It's awesome. Couldn't agree more. I think after Mario left, the fallout was just immediate, right? You just saw people decommitting left and right. And really it felt like that as far as, where these guys are located, it really felt like that national brand was kind of evaporating right before our eyes, right? You saw Landon Holaby, Kelvin Banks, Cameron Williams, all decommitted. Those guys are all coming out of Texas. You have Banks and Williams in the time since committing to Texas. And then Landon Holaby, it looks like he's actually going to be making his decision tomorrow. I saw that on Twitter before we hopped in this podcast, Stephen, that it was a picture of him in an Oregon uniform and then him in a Texas Tech uniform. saying stay tuned tomorrow, something along those lines. So I haven't talked to him in a while, but I kind of feel like the writing's on the wall with DeRuyter and Yates going to Texas Tech. But who's to say for sure? It's not a done deal. But as far as what Alyssa's saying here, I think it's great because you have an opportunity if these guys are staying committed, or even if they're not signing and if they're uncommitted. So if they're committed and they're not signing tomorrow, or if they're uncommitted and they're not making their final decision tomorrow, that's a window open for Dan Lanning and the rest of the staff, which is so crucially important considering that he has to be in Georgia, help them with the playoff prep.
Yep, I agree. There's a handful of guys who obviously decided, instead of completely decommitting, that they were just announcing that they wouldn't sign tomorrow. Obviously, you'd like them to sign tomorrow, but again, you hit the nail on the head. It gives Dan Lanning that window to get in there and be able to talk to those recruits. And based off of the short list of evidence we've got so far with his communication with Oregon players and Oregon related, personnel, I think he's going to do good, do well with that. So I'm excited that he does get that window. I think it's going to be fruitful for us. And again, everybody loses guys. And I think it's like you said, when Mario first left, for about 24, 48 hours, it felt like the walls it was just everything was falling down, right? We were losing people left and right. I was real worried about overall the state of what the 2022 or the next class was going to be, as well as the current roster. And so I think that those kind of huge fears have been put to rest for the most part. Now we have to capitalize off that, right? I think that if we get this opportunity for him to go into these recruits' houses and, talk to them and try to convince them to come back and sign on that dotted line for us, and he goes over, then, okay, maybe that might be a tad cause for concern. But I think the main thing to focus on here is, look, this year, recruiting wise, is not going to be a top 5 class just based off what's already gone. We have to accept that. Let's focus on what's already on the roster, which again is a very young and talented roster. And then the following season or the following class of recruits. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, because that's when he gets his first. This class upcoming isn't Dan Lanning's class. It's the leftover crumbs of Mario Cristobal's class. Talented crumbs though they may be. So the year after, the following season, is really going to be where we see him, him nose to the grindstone in terms of, what kind of recruiter he really is. And can he get people that are over in the South, in Texas, Florida, that Georgia area, his past recruiting pipeline, if he can get them to come out west.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that was one of the tough things about the departure for Cristobal. Is as good as that 2022 class was at the time that he left, I feel like it had something to be desired as far as the recruiting optics overall, because you see those top programs pushing ahead into 2023 already. And it felt like Oregon was just about to, kind of cross that threshold of, okay, we have a really solid 2022 group. Let's take it a step further and push ahead. You see the programs like Georgia, Oklahoma, Notre Dame doing that on a pretty regular basis. So that was kind of just a secondary little tidbit that I kind of wanted to say there. And then Chunky Monkey had a question. Frequent listener, viewer of the podcast. Appreciate the question and you tuning in. After his first Oregon press conference, what are your impressions on how he'll be with you guys, the media, weekly and post-game interviews? I thought it was great. I mean, this is definitely a good question because you can kind of tell a lot, I feel like, about a coach, with how they interact with the media. That was one of the biggest things I was kind of learning once I actually got out here and ultimately got to talk to Mario in person with the rest of the reporters. What kind of questions do they enjoy? Which ones do they deflect on? Or do they just I learned with Mario, if he didn't like your question, he would kind of attack how you phrased it. So it's just all, kind of a learning experience. But I was talking with Brooks Austin, who runs our Georgia site for SI. And he was saying that, they only get to talk to the coordinators like once or twice, like a year, like hardly at all. And we were getting to talk to Mario, Moorhead, and DeRuyter at the top of every week. So he was saying he was excited to see kind of what Lanning was like in his conference. And I think he's going to be great. I mean, you can tell he's a guy who's super, super excited for the opportunity. And I think he probably views it as an opportunity to prove himself, even though he's been at some really good schools. It's one thing to run one side of the ball. It's a totally different thing when you're running the entire organization, the entire program. So I think he's going to be, pretty good with the media as far as, being, willing to talk and kind of excited to answer questions. But at the same time, kind of got to see how things develop, and how do coaches interact after a loss, or after there's some hardship they're going with. That's obviously another dynamic that is going to be on the table.
Yeah, I think Mario definitely got a little prickly at points with the media, you could say, and I think you hit it
Such an
on the head.
interesting word to use.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the right way to phrase it. Like sometimes I would get a little just ugh when he would respond, based off of his demeanor. But I think Lanning, as actually, I mean, as of yesterday, obviously he welcomed everything with open arms. Um, I think him being young is going to be different in that sense as well, because I think Cristobal was definitely one of those more traditional coaches in every sense of the word, and that includes I don't think he enjoyed his media obligations, right? And so I think that Lanning is of the age group where they kind of understand a little bit more that that's not only a huge part of the job, but with recruits being so dialed into this digital age, their post game conferences are going to end up on someone's TikTok, on someone's YouTube feed, on someone's Twitter. They're going to be seeing that stuff, and so I think that Lanning's a little more in tune to that. I think it's just more of an age thing, though, not necessarily just specifically him. We'll see, though. Yesterday, he was obviously very welcoming to questions, as you need to be in your introductory press conference. But I'm excited. I think he's going to be. I'm excited to learn more about him as well. I saw that interview that you referenced, and there wasn't much. I could barely find any film of him speaking while the coordinator at Georgia. I'm excited to hear, what he has to say after practice during the week. I'm really excited to hear him get excited about the game plans that he's talking about implementing. I always enjoy when coaches kind of, can put other media stuff aside for the answer of that question and really go X's and O's for a second. I think it's always very entertaining. So I'm excited for that aspect as well. I think he's going to be a fun interview, though, regardless.
I love hearing football talk, from coaches. I think there were definitely some moments when Mario was here that I would ask him about offensive line, or like, what are you seeing from a certain group? And there's definitely terminology that just goes way over my head because I never played football at a high level. But I think that's when you can really see that their passion and their expertise about a sport. Alex Mirabal, heck, every time I talked to him, I felt like I was just at the offensive line academy or whatever you want to call it. But he was definitely a character, and he was just probably one of my favorite coaches to cover on this staff. All right. We'll get more questions here. This one's from David. Thanks for the question. What are the OC targets? I thought we would hear back from Dillingham today. Is he still in play? Yeah, he's the biggest name that we're hearing right now as far as someone with direct ties to Lanning. I think that I saw some report or something on Twitter about he was at a Florida State meeting either this morning or yesterday. So still, he was, as of that report, he was still in Tallahassee. But at the same time, we don't necessarily know if that's indicative of his decision to stay or if he wants to come to Eugene. But we can kind of dive in on this a little bit because I think that some of the questions that people have about Lanning is his coaching tree and how that's going to ultimately play into how he builds his staff and how he brings in people with regard to building his program. Because I think one of the things that I always admired about Mario was that he, being on Duck Twitter, how antsy they can get. They want the recruits now, they want the wins now, and they want the hires to happen now. And I understand it because, Oregon's a very high achieving program. So I can, you can get where that would come from. But what I meant to say is that Mario was always very methodical in his approach, bringing guys in, vetting people extensively, even though there was all this noise and pressure from the fan base at times to make a hire. And, we talked about the similarities between Mario and Lanning as far as their press conferences and their demeanor and what they were talking about. And he was saying, I think that, I hear that, and I know this timing is pretty poor, especially when I have a team, a defense that I have to help prepare for. But he was saying, right is more important than fast. And I'm going to take my time to make sure that I'm bringing the right people on board to make this program a great one. So he's the main guy that we know that's actually tied to him, but I haven't seen a whole lot of other names that are kind of out there. I know Joe Brady was a name that a lot of people thought of kind of after he got hired. But I don't know. I'm not sure how realistic Brady is right now. Are you hearing anything or seeing anything on Twitter?
Mostly what I'm seeing is Dillingham. I've seen I don't know. Pipe dream is too strong of a word, but for that kind of thing for Brady, I don't think he's really in play. But yeah, Dillingham is really what I've heard most. But I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be a rushed decision. One, because yeah, he is focusing on that Georgia playoff game that he's got. But I wouldn't want him to rush it, right? I think that he's got a real opportunity. We've given him the keys. Clearly, he's got the keys to the bus. Nobody else is driving the bus. He's got the keys to the castle. So I think that we just gotta let him, kind of recruit on his own if he has to for a while, and make sure that hire is the right hire, because he's a defensive coach. So I really want to make sure that somebody on the offense is going to have the freedom to do what they want to do. I think that could have been a little bit of a knock on Mario. A little bit is that he kind of overstepped in his CEO duties a bit, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But yeah, I'd rather get it right than get it fast. I think the Oregon coaching search itself was sort of the same way, right? I was dying all week waiting for them to make that hire. It was the biggest refresh thing I had every single second of every single day. But I'm really glad it took as long as it did to find this guy, because I think they made the right hire. So I think he should, go slow. But yeah, overall, in terms of rumors and such, Dillingham's been leading the charge in terms of smoke.
All right, yeah. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one and seeing what's going on about bringing on a hire. Question from Mikey G: Did Lanning add any specifics about when and where he'll be over the coming weeks for recruiting, all while coaching during the playoff? Yeah, this is another one of those things that just kind of ties back into how hard the timing is with everything, because you saw this last weekend. A lot of recruits were taking their final visits. Some of them officials, some of them unofficials. You saw Cyrus Moss going all the way across the country. Starting at USC in Los Angeles and flying all the way out to Miami to spend some time with Mario Cristobal over there. So obviously that's a big relationship that carries a lot of weight. But as far as recruiting, I think he's going to be pretty limited to his phone right now, seeing obviously that he's run the defense at Georgia, but also because if you're looking at the NCAA contact period, this is another thing I can probably try to bring up here to make a little bit more sense for people who don't know. So it looks like they're in a dead period right now. If you can see the screen here, December 13th through January 13th. And this is just kind of what it said. It says the 7 days immediately before the first day of classes of the institution's second academic term that are not part of the contact period, applicable only to prospective student athletes who intend to enroll mid-year. So basically from now, it looks like until mid-January, really, it's going to be a quiet or dead period. So that's why you saw those coaches that were going in home and getting that final FaceTime with a lot of these recruits to hopefully seal the deal or, make sure that guys were locked in. So I think as far as where he'll be, I think he'll be with Georgia pretty much until, they either win it all or lose against Michigan and then get back to Eugene. As a Duck fan, I would kind of wonder where you're at, because are you rooting for Georgia because you want to see the defense do well, or are you rooting for Michigan because you want them to lose and get to work for Oregon? What do you think about that dynamic, Steven?
Yeah, I mean, so from an Oregon perspective, I want them to do really well. I want this defense to perform in dominating fashion, and I want basically every Oregon fan to be saying that is what we are getting right there, or that's what we can have. That's what we should shoot for. So there's that blueprint, right? Because that defense was all the talk of college football the entire season up until Alabama did them dirty in the SEC title game. So, I think that this is an opportunity for them to redeem themselves, and I think that energy is going to translate over. Personally speaking, Max, I don't think you knew this about me, but I was raised by a mother who is a diehard Michigan Wolverine fan, a U of M grad. She never missed a football game at all when she was there. So I grew up rooting for the Wolverines. So personally, I'm actually going to be rooting for the boys out in Ann Arbor to pull that one off. But in terms of with my Duck hat on, I want to see that defense dominate throughout the playoff.
All right. And then got a question from Sean Nichols. What about Feld? This means talking about Aaron Feld. Yeah, he's another one of those guys that has been rumored to be following Mario to Miami. He's a guy who has connections in the South. Your comment, Sean, and they have Georgia connections. I think also it's another guy that makes a lot of sense, right? When you're looking at kind of the identity of a program, a lot of that is rooted in the strength and conditioning coach, and the kind of bodies that Mario wanted to build while he was here, and then certainly is going to want to build at Miami, right? Those huge, big big guys that can run you over. So I feel like it's not finalized and it hasn't been announced, but I think it's probably pretty safe to think that Feld's going to be following him over there.
Yep.
This question from Todd. Any chance of getting Dan's brother Jordan on staff somewhere? Maybe his Twitter space rep. So I know you're new to Twitter, Steven. Have you heard the buzz about all this? Did you get to partake in any of the Twitter spaces before Lanning became official?
Yeah, I was actually in the one with his brother a little bit. I loved it. I thought that you don't get that insight very often, right? And Coach Lanning said that at the presser that he hadn't heard about that entire interaction until I believe right before he said he came out. I'm not sure if I buy that. I'm sure he probably had to get a little bit of a blessing from his brother there to be able to spill those kind of details and that kind of thing. I don't think he was completely rogue, but I would love to have that guy more involved, right? I mean, it got so many eyes on the program. Rob Mullins got into that chat. If we can that's something that I think Oregon can capitalize on specifically, right? Like it's a brand that it's more than nationally known. It's known worldwide. It is. I've heard stories of buddies of mine who are fellow alum, and I never studied abroad or anything like that, but they did, and they would literally show me pictures of the Duck O in Prague, in England, Germany. So, I mean, this brand is huge. I think that only helps the brand, and I'd love to get him involved.
Yeah, those were super fun. I was in a handful of them over the weekend.
Yeah.
And before and after he got hired, I got to run my own space, and it's really cool to see how many people hop in there so quickly. And people have been talking about it as far as like it's kind of like old time radio. It's kind of like you're at a sports bar. It's like a little bit of different vibes, a little bit of mixture of different vibes, I should say. I really liked it. I think the thing that I learned is that you can't allow too many people to speak at once. So I'm kind of trying to figure out, do I want to do that one-on-one kind of deal where followers, ask me a question and then they're muted and then I answer it, or do I approve a bunch of people and then we're all going? Because then it can get really messy really quick. But that was super cool, and we're definitely going to have to do some of those spaces moving forward. And maybe you and me can co-host one of those. I'm assuming it'll kind of work the same way as these YouTube lives do. Just let them know when we're going live and make it happen. So it's a really cool way to build community with the Duck fan base. Let's see here. A question from David. You learn the hard lessons of how to switch and pick staff at smaller schools. Any concern for a young coach to make the tough hire decisions? What do you think about that one?
I think it's a great question. One that I haven't really pondered too much, I got to say. But again, I think it goes back to the trust that we're placing in this guy, right? We all know that he's a young coach with not much experience on paper, no head coaching experience on paper, right? So we get that. But I think he understands, and he's definitely been around guys who have made those tough decisions, right? Nick Saban sure isn't shying away from a tough decision based on players or personnel. Same with Coach Kirby Smart. So I think that we just have to go in and blindly trust when it comes to this aspect, right? None of us are in that building when it comes to those conversations. And those conversations are generally kept pretty close to the vest in terms of the program itself and the people involved with them. So I don't have a real concern about it, just because I'm going in here with the glass more than half full when it comes to that situation. So it's a legitimate question. I haven't given it any concern.
Sure. Yeah. And I think one thing that I think back to was actually along the lines of kind of this question that he got asked in the press conference. Was he was saying, when he was reflecting on his journey as a coach, he was saying, when I was in those meetings, when I was under other coaches, as an assistant, I was kind of asking myself those questions. Who would I bring in if I was making those hires? How would I run the show if this was my team? So I think that was one of the really cool things that I appreciated about his press conference yesterday, was just talking about how he's been preparing for this moment for his, entire coaching career. Because he was saying at every stop that I've had, I've always been, wondering what's next. And, a lot of people were skeptical about, him maybe leaving, with regard to, Mario and Willie both leaving for bigger jobs, but because he was at a smaller school, it's like, this could be the last stop for him. So I can't remember if I said that in this podcast or my last podcast. So sorry if that's repetitive, but I can understand the concern because he hasn't done it before, but at the same time, he's been around really good coaches and he's going to know what aspects to look for, what characteristics and traits he wants to see in his guys, who's going to work well with him. And then maybe he's going to be able to, like we've said with the coaching tree, tap into some of those roots that he's had. So I also think it's encouraging that he's not going to rush into things. So I have a little bit more confidence there. Next question: how many commits are planning to sign with Oregon this week? It's not too many. Not looking for a big splash, not expecting a big splash rather. On Wednesday, early signing day, there were reports of Harrison Taggart planning to sign, I believe, and then Devin Jackson, a linebacker out of Nebraska. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening, I have an awesome interview with him that I did. So go ahead and look at that video if you want to get to know him a little bit better. His dad actually went to I don't think he went to Oregon State, but I think he was from Corvallis, and he was telling the story about how his dad said, I don't ever see myself coming back to Oregon. And then now Devin's going to be coming in as a Duck. So that's a name to watch. And then Sir Mel's big time defensive lineman huge defensive lineman out of Nevada. I believe he's signing as well. So kind of got to see what else. T-Mac is reportedly going to be signing on Wednesday, but obviously we have to kind of follow along and see what else is going on there. And then that just kind of all goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Stephen, where it's a good thing that some of these guys, if they're still committed and they're not signing, it still gives them an opportunity to for the staff to build that relationship. Sorry, I took that one off the screen. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, I'm encouraged that we've got that additional time to go for anybody, and we'll have conversations that are, not signing on the dotted line tomorrow, but also not signing anywhere else tomorrow. So, it's not too many commits. Last I saw hard commits was, I don't know, I've seen 9, I've seen 11. It keeps switching, so something around that number, but we'll see.
Yes, and then Warren has a great comment here that goes back to what we were talking about with the last question. About the hiring process. So I think this is probably taken from the press conference. Warren said, in quotes, "As a coordinator, player assistant, or recruiting coordinator, I always took every position to prepare for the next, and this is no different." And then this is Dan Lanning using this job to prepare for his next job? Okay, so yeah, I think that when I read that, I was thinking it could support my last point, and then it went into a different question. But I think it still makes sense. He's been preparing for this for a long time, and he said that he views this as a final stop, and he doesn't really think that this is going to develop into another job opportunity. I mean, the only thing I could maybe think of would be the NFL. Potentially, but he said as much yesterday, and I think that really probably should give a lot of fans confidence. He's saying, I want to be here as long as I can, as long as we're going to have me.
Yep. I mean, yeah, you're right. He said as much yesterday. His brother said that his entire goal, his entire life has been to become a head coach at a premier program. So he's got that now. I think the only thing I'd be worried about potentially is the NFL, but I think that would only happen if he wins big in years 1 through 3 and 4, maybe. So I'm not worried about a dream job potential like it happened with Taggart and what happened with Mario. I think the NFL is probably the biggest concern, but that would be because he's winning. So I would potentially make that trade-off.
Yeah, so it's worth it, taking that risk to get a guy that has some solid experience, even though it's not at the head coaching level. Still working my way through the live chat, and I think I've caught up to a lot of them. Mike said, "Hey Max, thanks for all that you do." Appreciate you, Mike. Thank you for the support and tuning in. It's always great to interact with you guys, and already coming up on 45 minutes, man. You think that people are excited about bringing in a new coach, huh, Steven?
Yeah, I think people are a little pumped out here in Eugene.
Yeah, they definitely are. Let's see what else. So we'll keep an eye on that chat box to see if you guys have any more questions or comments. Just while we're here, I'm gonna just to plug kind of what's going on tomorrow. We'll have a signing day tracker story to get any updates going out of there. And I think we can also zoom out a little bit and see what's going on with the Pac-12. I feel like USC is going to make a splash, obviously with Lincoln Riley there, and maybe DeBoer will get some more steam on the recruiting trail. We could talk about Washington for a second. Some of the news that they had out of Seattle today. They landed Indiana transfer quarterback Michael Penix, which I think was probably encouraging for them to see because a lot of people thought it was going to be Haener that was going to be following DeBoer up to Seattle, returning to Seattle, actually. But I think that's definitely an important position for them to hit on, because Dylan Morris, I feel like he's pretty limited as a quarterback. And then Sam Heward got thrown in at the end of the Apple Cup, which was pretty ugly. I think I was flying back to Eugene or flying back to San Jose that night, and the Apple Cup was pretty bad. But what do you make of that move with Penix going to UW?
Yeah, I think to say that University of Washington was offensively challenged this past season would be an incredibly nice way to say it. So Penix is a good move. I mean, watching Michigan games back home with my mom, whenever they played Indiana the past few years, he played them tough. I know he played Ohio State tough a couple times as well. Indiana was in the mix not this season so much, but the year before that. Yeah, I mean, they're not a bad team, and Penix played really well. He had a lot of buzz around him. He was hurt on and off this past season, so I think it's a good move for them. He's a good player.
Yeah, so we'll see how the rest of the Pac-12 picture shakes out. I feel like Delora at Washington, he's probably settled in there as a pretty entrenched starter. Oregon State, we'll see if they keep rolling with Chance Nolan. I mean, the Oregon quarterback question is probably one of the biggest ones that a lot of people have right now, aside from the Kenny Dillingham hire that we're maybe gonna be seeing here soon, and we're still waiting for official word on Dillingham and what his next move is. For those of you that are just joining us, there's been reports that Oregon's targeting Dillingham to be the next offensive coordinator, but we're still awaiting word on that right now as we're recording this 5:46 on a Tuesday evening. So that's kind of the latest update that we have there, is that there is no update. We don't know if he's coming to join Oregon or not, but I think it would be a pretty good, decision for him, as far as, having the opportunity to look at the roster that Oregon has and work with some really promising quarterback talent, which kind of leads into our next question from Gary. We'll tackle it. We going to get an offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator soon. Who are they looking at? We have, as far as that goes, Dillingham's the one for offense, but the one that has kind of emerged, it's kind of been rumored, is Tosh Lupoi is being kind of looked at as a defensive coordinator that candidate for Lanning staff. And I feel like with Tosh Lupoi, he's a name that has been circled around for a long, long time around the Oregon circle. Every time that there's a new coaching hire, as far as the head coach goes, I feel like his name gets brought up. What do you think about that? Is that a name you're familiar with, Steven?
Yeah, no, I've heard the buzz around Lupoi. Again, you've said it's been like that for a while. I've heard a number of folks who are pretty, based off of no evidence, pretty, set that Lanning might call the defensive play calls himself. Have you heard anything about that? What do you think about that?
I haven't heard anything about that just yet. I mean, it would make some sense. But we don't know what kind of a head coach he's going to be, right? That kind of feeds into the unknown. Is he going to be kind of the CEO guy who assembles his staff and kind of, is hands off and lets them do their thing? Or is he going to be someone who really takes the reins and, leaves his own imprint on it? Because I feel like Mario was kind of the CEO kind of guy, but couldn't get out of his own way sometimes. And obviously you saw that hinder the offense this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure which I'd prefer, to be honest with you, right? Like Mario was definitely of the CEO variety. Chip, I think he had Helfrich as the OC, right? But I think he was a little bit more involved in those offensive decisions. I don't know. Half the time I watch a Cardinals game, I'm impressed that Cliff Kingsbury's calling his own plays. And the other half, I think he's getting in his own way too much of the time. And coordinators or coaches who call their own plays get a little bit too cute sometimes, right? And sometimes they need a coordinator to check them. So I'm not really sure what he's going to do. I guess I'd like to see him make a good hire there and kind of take a more CEO kind of level, especially if he's going to be here for the long term, right? Let's bring in some new blood. Let's get this into a coordinator pumping house.
Definitely. I really like that about just making it a factory for coordinators, because that kind of ensures some stability at the head coaching spot.
100%.
But yeah, what really gets me excited about Lupoi, if he ultimately comes to fruition, would be he's an elite recruiter. He's got those West Coast ties. I can look here just on you look at some of these names that he's landed as a college recruiter. You have Najee Harris, who's absolutely tearing it up for the Steelers now. For you guys who are watching this that aren't familiar with this page, you're looking at all the best players that Tosh Lupoi has recruited, either been the primary or secondary recruiter. This is a really cool feature that 247 has
that's
on
awesome.
their site. Shaq Thompson, who's he's a Washington guy. Keenan Allen, one of the top receivers in the NFL. Dylan Moses, Mac Wilson, Jonah Williams, Tua, Jalen Waddle. Like if you can get him on the staff, I mean, just imagine having Lanning and Tosh in the living room together.
And Don Johnson.
And Don Johnson, and I think that would just be, man, that just gets me excited as a guy who covers recruiting, just to continue seeing those big names, still be, still have Oregon in the running for some of these top guys. Let's see. Next question we have here is from Quack Attack 49er. How much influence does Lanning have over who plays quarterback in the Alamo Bowl? I mean, considering that Lanning's not really, considering that he's coaching in Georgia and McClendon's going to be the interim, I'd say pretty much none. I would kind of think of it, right? But that's what's so weird about the timing of this hire and the bowl game that they're in. The Alamo Bowl is a pretty decent bowl, but it just feels like, at least to me, it's like I'm kind of ready to get on to next year and just see what Dan Lanning's team's going to look like, what the program's going to look like. So I would think that it's not very much, wouldn't have very much say in this upcoming game for Oregon in the Alamo Bowl, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Yep, I agree. I've sort of started looking to next year as well, just in terms of the excitement factor alone, which is kind of sad, right? Oregon, Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl. That's something that, if not all this noise was happening at both schools, really, with the changes going on in the coaching staff, I think it'd be a huge game that everybody's talking about. But it seems like everything's kind of been overshadowed by what's going on in both with Norman, both out of Norman, Oklahoma, and in Southern California, and that connection. And then with what's going on here with Cristobal leaving and bringing in Lanning, it's just been bigger news than just the game itself. So, but yeah, I don't think he's going to have really any influence. You're right. He's focused on Georgia. I think he's really putting his full attention into that in terms of the coaching aspect. Recruiting aspect is definitely going to be focused on Oregon, obviously. But yeah, we've got an interim head coach already named. I don't see him having too much influence. So
definitely. Question from Gary. Max, what coaches do you think we can or will retain? We talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. So Gary, not sure if you missed out on that maybe, but I already talked about McClendon, I think, being a priority for them to retain. And I think that the administration thought as much when they gave him the interim title, right? Yeah. I think that definitely bodes well or suggests that they could do that. But there have been reports that Miami wants him pretty badly, so we got to see what's going on there. But I also think that Rod Chance has done a pretty solid job with the corners. He's another young, relatable guy. He has Florida ties, so you're looking. That's been one of my biggest wants for this staff for really since Mario was here was get back into Florida. I think that's huge. You look at Brandon Dorless. Can you imagine having 5 Brandon Dorlesses, sprinkled throughout your team, or just people of that caliber? Those Florida guys are just different. And then also Jim Mastro. He's another guy that I think we haven't heard too much about. Those running backs have been great for Oregon. And I think that the weird situation about it all, you look at Seven McGee saying he was going to enter the portal, and then he met with Lanning and he said he's not going to enter the portal. Every running back on this year's roster could play again next year. Like, that just absolutely blows my mind. Like, I didn't think about CJ having any more eligibility, but he still does because of the COVID year. And then I feel like he's probably going to go just because he's already, gotten injured a bunch, and, he's played a lot of football. But Travis Dye kind of seems like a wild card if we're, talking about Mastro and the running backs here.
Yep. I think McClendon, obviously, Salavea, Mastro for sure. Guy's definitely a wild card in terms of coming back, but I do think he's going to come back. I think, honestly, he just needs to get physically bigger before he's going to go to the NFL. With how hard he hits the hole, he's going to get banged around a little bit. So I think he'll be back. back to an earlier question as well. I would love to see him retain Coach Feld. I don't think it's going to happen though. Everything I've been seeing on Miami message boards specifically is that it's pretty much a done deal. It's already been offered, and it's just a matter of semantics at this point. I know he's still in Eugene. Follow him on Instagram, and I know he's been in town, right? But I would not be surprised if Feld goes, which would suck. I love Coach Feld. I think he's done great things, but just to bring eyes on the program, right? And I think he's done great stuff with the players. They all love him. Everybody who makes a statement about Oregon on Twitter, whether if it's from leaving or graduating or anything like that, they mention Coach Feld. So I'd love to see him retain, but I don't think he's going to stay.
Yeah, we'll have to. We'll keep you updated on that. Once the announcements come out about contract extensions or new contracts. So make sure to stay tuned over Dutch Digest to see what's going on there. Kind of winding down the show now, so make sure you guys get your questions out here to see if we can tackle a couple more before we leave. Man, Steven, this has been great so far. I mean, we got a couple more questions to answer, but it's been cool having you on here and just getting your perspective here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I can't believe we've already been on for almost an hour. Time truly flies when you're having a good time, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun. Mikey G has another question. Realistic to expect 3 losses next year with all of the turnover and young quarterback. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to look too forward into next year because we still have to see NFL draft decisions. We still have to see what the recruiting class is going to look like. We still have to see what the staff's going to look like. But yeah, I don't know if I'd. Let's see. I mean, that Georgia game is going to be really tough. I think BYU is going to be a tough out. I mean, I'm not putting them on the same level of Georgia, but I'm just looking at games that they have to play. They don't have to play USC next year unless they meet in the title game, which is kind of interesting. I was looking at the schedule last night, and they have UCLA again. But I think if what I remember is correct, let me see if I can pull it up here. I think that this year their tough games really came on the road. But I think next year a lot of their tough games come at home, which is obviously a tremendous advantage for anybody when you look at Autzen Stadium. Random side note, another thing that I think was good about Lanning's press conference was that he didn't mispronounce Autzen, although I don't really think that you would, but
or Eugene.
Yeah. So that was good. I know when I was at Gonzaga for the longest time, I thought it was Spokane, not Spokane. So, yeah, he did himself some favors there by making sure he pronounced everything correctly. But yeah, looking at home games for Oregon next year, they have Stanford at home, UCLA at home, UCLA at home. My throat's getting dry. Excuse me. Utah at home. That's going to be a huge game, and Washington at home, and then home games for Oregon State and Washington State. So, I'd say 2-3 losses. Early projections. It's almost not even worth saying it right now because there's so much unknown.
Yep, I agree. I mean, I think the Georgia game is obviously a toss-up, at least, right? I mean, that's going to be a really tough game, especially since that's technically a neutral site, but I mean, it's in Atlanta. So I would consider that a home game for Georgia. BYU, again, is also, like you said, it's going to be a tough out. The home schedule next year is really exciting. It's going to be rocking at Autzen. I'm very excited with Washington coming in, with UCLA coming in, Stanford coming in, want to get revenge for that debacle over there at the farm this past season. So I think it's weird because Oregon's at a point, and Max, you and I have talked about this, where it's almost like a playoff berth is the only acceptable thing. Rose Bowl isn't even enough, it seems like. And so 3 losses, I think I honestly think that people are going to expect less than that. I think we're going to be all right with 1 with Georgia. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if some people really expect us to run the table with that or after that Georgia game next year, heading into the Pac-12 title. And then in terms of the young quarterback situation, everything I've heard out of Ty Thompson's kind of camp is that he's staying, which I'm thrilled about. That kid, when he throws the ball, it looks like it's on a string. So I'm very excited to see him and what he can do next year. So if Ty Thompson really gets it going and they air the ball out, I could see us maybe 1 loss, possibly 2. But yeah, expectations wise, I don't think people are going to expect anything more than 3. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then staying on the quarterbacks, just a couple more questions for us here on the Ducks Dish podcast. Mike asks, kind of along the similar lines with young quarterbacks, Max, what do you know about Ty Thompson? What's the buzz around him? Is he good or has ways to go? Yeah, I mean, what I can tell you about Ty Thompson is that he's a really, really bright young guy. I covered him extensively before he got to Oregon. I did some Zoom interviews with him, which was really fun. He's looked really encouraging. I feel like from the action that I've been able to see for him, as far as from him, I should say, the ball looks really good coming off of his hand. I think that was one of the biggest differences that kind of stood out to me when I looked at, Anthony Brown and Ty Thompson. The ball coming out of Ty's hand just had so much more zip to it. He's incredibly mobile in the pocket, and he has that pocket presence. One of the biggest things I look for, Steven, is when you're looking at a guy you could classify as dual threat, and especially when they're young, can they stay in the pocket, or are they just looking to bolt out of the first opportunity? Because I think you miss out on a lot of big plays and a lot of yards when you're going out of the pocket too soon.
Yep.
But I think those are some of the things I really like about Ty, and the poise, right? You think about guys like Marcus and Justin Herbert, how poised they were at such a young age. And I think that's definitely one of the things that has me excited about Ty. If he wins the job next year, he's the only guy that we've really seen a very small sample size from, half of a football against Stony Brook. But who's to say that Jay Butterfield and Robbie Ashford, they're going to want to have a say in that QB competition as well. And what if they bring in a transfer? Who knows?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they bring in a transfer. I think Ty is probably the leading guy heading into the offseason, assuming all stays the same. I think one of the three is going to transfer out of Thompson, Ashford, and Butterfield. I don't think all three of them are going to stay. But yeah, like you said, and like I mentioned, when Ty throws the ball, it looks like there's a string on it. He's got incredible zip. The composure's there. And yeah, with those dual threat quarterbacks, I think an important thing too is when they do get out of the pocket, when they are forced to, do they settle it down before they throw and get into that pocket motion with their feet set outside of the pocket, turn their hips, or do they throw, off of 1 foot heading out of bounds, like we saw Anthony Brown, unfortunately, too, a couple of times this season, right? So from what I've seen in his limited action at Autzen this year, when he played, he did exactly that. When he did get out of the pocket, was able to get in there, square his feet, throw from his hips. So he's also got a really tight motion. But Butterfield and Ashford can throw the ball around too. They can really sling the rock. Ashford, I believe, is on the baseball team as well, right? So he's got some zip in there, and he's a natural athlete. Obviously, you're not a great athlete if you're playing 2 Division I sports at a premier program. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't think all 3 of them stay though next year.
Yeah, we'll have to watch that quarterback competition and see what ultimately happens. Before we get out of here, Steven, we're gonna hopefully be doing more of these live shows, podcasts, or videos together. Where can people find more of you?
Yeah, so like Max said earlier, I just joined the Twitter sphere, so I'm at SB Sports 541 over on Twitter. Going to be establishing a YouTube channel as well pretty soon here to just be uploading these kind of videos and stuff, kind of syncing it up with Max. So we're going to be working together though in the future. So just keep an eye on Max's page. Shoot me a follow as well. Would really appreciate it. Would love to grow that. And I look forward to joining you, Max, in future conversations. I'm really excited about this year, about where this program is headed, and about the hire of Coach Lanning. I think big things ahead for the Ducks.
Absolutely. Well, if you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at the name on your screen at mtorresports. If you're watching in the live stream, have a big favor to ask of you. Just go ahead and subscribe to the channel, please. That little red box on your screen really helps me keep doing what I want here and getting to cover the Ducks, which is what I really enjoy doing. And so go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and then you can also find me at ducksdigest.com. We got stories coming out all the time. We have Dan Lanning's contract. We have more stuff coming out of his presser and, kind of the vision that he has for the program. And then you can find us on all our other social media platforms at Ducks Digest. So go ahead and hit the like button, and we will see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Take care.